an armada of 10,000 stopped for a life sign of one. In all his cycles studying the deep currents of the void, Lemire had never seen a fleet of their magnitude halt for a derelict vessel. It was a monstrous shadow of metal floating dead in the starless expanse. Lemire pressed his gelatinous membrane against the observation bubble, his bioluminescence pulsing in pale, curious blues. As a Tideschlaler initiate, he was supposed to be logging navigational hazards, but the architecture of the human generation ship captivated him entirely. There was a repair patch near the main vault entrance. It looked utterly primitive. A jagged slab of crude, dark alloy welded haphazardly over a breach, completely mismatched against the surrounding hull. It made no structural sense. Why would a species capable of crossing the galaxy patch their most secure archive with scrap metal? Would you open a door sealed for 1,000 years? The Nephiri did, and the record of what waited in the dark remains forever chilling. The breaching team severed the locks, expecting to find kinetic weapons. The heavy doors separated with a groan of distressed metal. There were no weapons. The chamber was unpowered, save for the pale glow of a single terminal illuminating a tiny figure. It was a human child, perhaps 8 standard cycles old, sitting cross-legged on the deck plates, swiping a finger across the illuminated screen. The child didn't look up when the doors opened. 10,000 warships hovered outside. Armed boarding parties flooded the room, and the tiny creature simply turned another digital page. What manner of being ignores an invading army? Lemire floated into the cavernous space behind the strike team. The silence was absolute. He was preparing to log the standard biological first contact protocols when the stillness of the boy was unnatural. So Lemire is watching this tiny biological specimen, and the tactical officers are sweeping the perimeter, and he realizes the life support scrubbers haven't cycled in what must be centuries. It was impossible. He should be dead. Lemire's core temperature plummeted, a profound and paralyzing dread immediately seizing his gelatinous structure. His primary tendrils retracted violently into his mantle. His blue bioluminescent glow faded to a dim, sickly gray. A droplet of condensation rolled down the side of his environmental suit. The vastness of the archive seemed to press down on the boarding party. Endless rows of dormant servers sleeping in the absolute zero of the void, while this solitary biological entity sat bathed in the pale light of a single surviving power cell. The child's gaze slowly lifted from the terminal, sweeping past the heavily armored Nephiri strike force as if they were nothing more than a passing weather phenomenon. The tension in the chamber thickened, turning the stale air into a physical weight that pressed against Lemire's sensory organs. The tactical commander approached the boy, raising a manipulator claw to confiscate the terminal. The child finally shifted. He did not flinch. He did not cry out. He just tapped the screen one final time. He waited. Lemire was a scholar. He was supposed to observe the universe with detached clarity, but the official records would forever omit that his internal fluids were vibrating with sheer panic at the sight of that small, delicate hand. The archive wasn't protected by shields, which was the first detail that should have warned the fleet admiral that approaching the derelict vessel was a catastrophic error in judgment, because anything left unguarded in this sector of the galaxy is never truly vulnerable. It was protected by history. Lemire extended a secondary trembling tendril toward the terminal's exposed optical port. The tactical commander was still shouting aggressive containment orders that the child ignored completely. Lemire interfaced with the ancient data stream to understand what this tiny biological anomaly was reading. The structural schematics initially indicated the generation ship was merely an unarmed civilian transport vessel, which meant the boy was defenseless against our boarding parties, until the deck plates beneath us began to vibrate at a frequency that immediately liquefied the lower half of my primary locomotion. Sack. The archive was waking up. I noticed the tactical commander's shadow cast by the terminal light was slightly crooked. I focused on that misaligned shadow for an unreasonably long time. The data flooded Lemire's fluid matrix. It was human history. It was a ledger of absolute survival. Frost crept across the inside of his visor. Not real frost, but the memory of frost, a phantom chill echoing from the ship's deepest cryogenic vaults. The boy hadn't been reading a story. He had been arming the derelict. The history files detailed exactly how the human vessel had survived the planetary bombardment of a forgotten war centuries ago. Ablative armor plates had vaporized when struck. The resulting dense gas cloud absorbed all subsequent directed energy, rendering the ship entirely impervious to sustained orbital fire. The harder the ancient enemy had fought, the more perfectly the human ship had shielded itself. The universe is infinitely larger and more terrifying than I ever allowed myself to believe. My gelatinous core contracted in absolute terror, and I found myself profoundly grateful to witness the sheer architectural brilliance of it. I knew with absolute certainty that if I survived this rotation, I would resign my academic commission and never study the void again. The boy smiled. The terminal broadcast a system-wide audio transmission across our entire 10,000 ship fleet, bypassing all our sophisticated encryption protocols with casual arrogance. "We gave you a day." A recorded, synthesized voice echoed through the vast, dark chamber. "That was yesterday. We'd apologize, but we'd need someone alive to apologize to." The jagged, dark alloy on the exterior hull was never a primitive repair patch. The data confirmed it was the fused, melted remains of dreadnoughts from the last empire that had attempted to breach this archive. A monument. The child simply closed the terminal screen, fully aware of the unimaginable devastation sleeping within the walls around him. A life sign of one had stopped an armada of 10,000.